Hi, Bill Henshaw here again with another issue in the recent news that some of you may have been following as well, and that's the Electoral College. Many of you know that the Electoral College is in recent years, with yet another attempt to abolish it underway by the legal quote-unquote luminaries such as Kamala Harris, or better known to me as Sacramento Shamala Harris, and Chuck Schumer, otherwise known as Up Chuck Schumer, and others, none of whom have a bleep an idea about the real issues involved and couldn't care less. To begin, this is not a political diatribe by yours truly, since I recognize the truth about government and the quote-unquote two-party system, which is really the Demo-Republican or Republican Party, depending on one's perspective on such things. While I do not believe the Electoral College has ever been an ideal solution to the election for the president, without this essential element in the Constitutional Convention, did they have Billy steak and cheeses in those days? There would have been no Constitution at all, at least south of the Mason-Dixon line. This is true because we in the South, and perhaps not the only ones, were concerned with the popular vote that a president could and likely would be easily elected by the voters in the northern industrial states, which would gain greater leverage over their agrarian brothers in the South, and just such a situation, albeit arising in Congress, led directly to the nullification crisis of 1830. See my video on this subject that'll be upcoming next time. Now, this was at a time when, compared to the last 100 years or so, the federal government was much more of a government of defined and limited powers based on the rule of law and the consent of the governed. Thus, the peril was not anywhere near what it is today. But with the quote-unquote Donald poised to summarily terminate birthright citizenship at the stroke of a pen, courtesy of his powers as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. That said, when one recognizes the multiple unopposed issues of constitutional law which I advocate, which undermine the very foundation of today's quote-unquote democracy, aka 3 wolves and 2 sheep voting on what's for dinner, arise here which highlight the importance of the continued vitality of the Electoral College and the Constitution itself. It becomes clear even to a classroom full of my proverbial 4th graders that we are very far afield from the original intent of the framers and have a lot of work to do to continue to secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. And you can learn a great deal about these issues and their consequences, many of which have been painfully apparent to any victims of the quote-unquote just us system, traffic courts, family courts, tax courts, to name a few. For more information, please send me an email at uwincourt@gmail.com. We now note that the constitutional provisions related to the Electoral College are one of the very few areas most constitutional scholars agree, and that the state legislature has exclusive control over how the electors are chosen. This would be all well and good, except that my decades of intense, passionate, and independent study of these areas and research of the Constitution, in concert with the documented record I have set, has disclosed that there are no states remaining which were admitted into this union. And that, by the way, would be up to and including Minnesota in 1859. Seemingly an astounding conclusion, but I have the goods here, including a 79-page unopposed brief on admission of new states, among other things, which is available as a part of my modestly priced constitutional defense document packets. This in turn boils down to a simple set of equations. No states equals no state legislatures equals no electors equals no electoral college equals no president equals no federal law. Coming to the quote-unquote election of 2016, there is no question that Hillary goddamn Clinton would have quote-unquote won based on the popular vote not a singular occurrence in the history of the United States, but this would have mitigated, if not destroyed, the fine balance between the large and small states of strikingly different character, and with today's purported quote-unquote electorate led to a situation where the lawful de jure jus sanguinis state citizens could be defeated by the votes of immigrants of who knows what poor nations whose primary agenda is to live off of government subsidies like social insecurity, disability, and the like, all of which programs are based on the collectivist, socialistic, altruistic concepts absolutely alien with the federated Republican form of government of defined and limited powers, such as we are supposed to have. Note carefully here that I am not saying that quote-unquote public welfare programs should not exist, just as there is no place for them in the federal government, as recently proposed by the quote-unquote the Donald, with a budget of almost $5 trillion. That's with a T. As usual, this is not me saying it. For a cogent and compelling explanation from a highly placed government office holder, please read the veto of, in effect, the Social Insecurity Act of 1854 by President Franklin Pierce, as recounted in the dissent of the Four Horsemen of the U.S. Supreme Court in Stewart Machine v. Davis, 301 U.S. 548, a complimentary copy cheerfully provided on request to those requesting information on availabilities of my materials. Also note that I practice what I preach, having rescinded my application for social insecurity benefits pursuant to the deceit, fraud, and treason in the process, and never having accepted one dime of quote-unquote benefits, despite being headed into my 13th year without any possibility of applying for, let alone receiving, any job, aka to the de facto government in Washington, as quote-unquote engaging in employment, which cannot be done without their permission. 8 U.S.C. 1324A. I did this because I can, and because I will have a case for controversy to present to the 9 old farts as soon as the judicial power of the United States is recognized again. This is why you do not have to go to such lengths, and I have developed pleadings which effectively deter any loss of perceived standing to invoke any of your rights to petition for redress of grievance in your case. Returning to the Electoral College, doing away with it not only does not solve any problems, it would create a lot more of them, most particularly when winning the popular vote in less than 10 states would very probably negate lesser losses in the other 40. And add to this that every activity under the sun in which you engage is now perceived by the 9 old farts to be within the scope of Congress's Commerce Clause powers, if not totally subject to the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, destroy state citizenship, not to mention our freedom and independence. And it has gotten to the point where a serious argument was recently made in North Carolina pursuant to the quote-unquote right of a transgender person, quote-unquote, to choose its public restroom, that taking a crap in a government-funded restroom affects interstate commerce for the purpose of invoking federal civil rights jurisdiction. If this is true, what activity of a citizen does not affect commerce? This is a perfect example of which illustrates the correctness of my main contention that there are no states remaining which were admitted into this union, and or that there is no Republican form of government guaranteed to the states by Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution of the United States. Please remember to like my videos, tell your friends, and subscribe to my videos as well. Thank you.